SVC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of iGaming Daily, sponsored by Optimove. Today we're going to be tackling two very different but very multi-dynamic developments taking place on the opposite sides of the Atlantic. So in the first half of the show, we'll be in the UK, where BetMGM has put its sports marketing into overdrive as the newish market entry seeks to build up visibility, most recently in horse racing. Then, after a quick ad break, we'll head over to the US, where a significant story has emerged regarding Bitcoin investments. I'm James Ross, and today I'm speaking to our Insider Sport and Payment expert team, Ted and Callum, along with their newest team member, Kieran O'Connor, who joined SBC just this month. How are you both doing today? And Kieran, I'll start with you. Excited?
Yeah, I'm really excited to sort of talk about BetMGM here and the sort of strategy that they've unfolded in this new year. Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, you've got a strong accent. Where are you from?
I'm from Leigh, which is near Wigan. So, yeah.
Yeah. Good one. And Callum, you okay?
Yeah, fine, James. Yeah, new year, new podcast, kind of. So, yeah, I'll be tackling all things Bitcoin ETF for those who don't really know what it's about in the second half.
Yeah, you'll mainly hear from Callum in the second half of the show, and Ted's Ted. Ted, you're okay. It's fine. We'll move on. Cool. Right, before we actually jump into the topics, though, now is probably an appropriate time to mention the sponsor of the podcast, and it's presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. Look, 56% of the EGR Power 50 have personalized player experiences with Optimove. Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. And for anyone attending ICE in February, make sure you visit the Optimove stand and mention that you listened to our episode of iGaming Daily, or just listen to iGaming Daily in general, and you will receive an Amazon gift card. So, like I said in the intro, we're going to talk about BetMGM in the first half. And Ted, I will start with you here. BetMGM, they're a newcomer to the UK market. Does the brand's partnership with Asvot show that the visibility in racing is still an essential for bookmakers over here?
Yeah, I mean, so as you said, yeah, they're a newcomer. I think they made a market entry in sort of the second half of last year, and it's interesting seeing them go down this route. I guess it's also kind of unsurprising because MGM, I don't think as a brand is particularly well known in the UK, not in comparison to how it is in the US. So obviously something that they've been quite keen on is getting that visibility through sports, which is the intrinsic, betting linked products. And horse racing over here, I don't think it's the biggest betting product anymore. I think it got surpassed by football a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. But it still is, obviously, it's a sport that has probably got the heaviest betting link. The whole concept of the sport really revolves around betting, and it's still a hugely popular betting market and betting product here. It tends to attract quite a very loyal and highly engaged customer base. Even though attendance have been falling a little bit over the years, there's still a real sort of strong core and people who pay a lot of attention to it, who go to race meetings, who watch it on ITV and racing TV. So getting visibility in the sport is definitely is always a reliable avenue to go down for any bookmaker, whether new or quite well established. And if you look at Ascot as well, it's probably, I'd say if you want to talk about a top 4 UK racecourses, you've got Ascot, Aintree, where the Grand National goes on, Cheltenham with the Cheltenham Festival, and then Epsom. And obviously Ascot's home to the Royal Ascot yearly meeting, which is huge. So I think partnering with a track like that size is probably quite a good strategy to go down if you want to make your mark in this betting market.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with BetMGM now, because obviously they're targeting a lot of UK sports, but there's also very recognisable brands, operator brands in the UK: William Hill, Coral, Ladbroke, Bet365, Betfred. Are the ones that I've just named off, or just reeled off, kind of are they a bit frightened of BetMGM now? Because they've made a big impact. I mean, every time I watch sports on TV, the first thing I'm introduced to is Chris Rock, doing the adverts, even on the radio. Like, they're making a big splash. So, do you think there's cause for concern for these other operators?
Maybe not frightened, but they'll certainly be very aware of what they're doing. And like you said, Chris Rock is playing quite a big role in their their iGaming element. Is he more on the casino side of things? I guess he kind of brings in that sort of Hollywood and entertainment focus to something that to a product that is geared more around that. And obviously in sports, we're seeing them go down some different, the more traditional avenue with clubs and racetracks. But I mean, these brands, like you say, William Hill, Coral, Ladbrokes, Bet365, Betfred, they're all very well established brands. They've got a really solid customer base. They've got their own marketing and sponsorship activities. Like Betfred, for example, just continuously renews its rugby league partnership, doesn't it, every year? William Hill has a lot of partnerships in horse racing as well. So I don't know if they'll be frightened, but they'll certainly be keeping an eye on it and saying, this is clearly someone who's eyeing up a lot of competition with us. So they're going to be looking at how they can respond, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Just while we're on Chris Rock, because he's done a lot of the promotional stuff for BetMGM since they've launched in the UK. What's the first thing that comes to mind from everyone when they hear Chris Rock's voice? Callum?
I know what you're probably going to think. There's Will Smith in it, but I'd say, I'd say Will Smith.
Oh, yeah, the slap, Will Smith. Yeah, Kieran?
I would have said the same thing, really. Get your wife out my mouth, sort of thing. That little scenario that happened the other year, but yeah. Yeah,
and Ted?
It is hard not to. That was a thing that it sort of got him the most publicity that he'd had, certainly in the UK for a while, hadn't it? Although I do remember him from that show, what was it? Everyone Hates Chris, that used to be on Channel 4 back in the day. Yeah, so that is the second thing that comes to mind.
See, my first thing is Marty from Madagascar.
Wow, throwing a real curveball in there.
Yeah, and it always goes back to that kind of the advertising codes that we talked about once, where if celebrity's on the advert and it kind of appeals to a younger generation, then it's kind of breaking the code. I don't think it's not the case here, because I'm of an older generation who know of Madagascar. Madagascar's there's not been a film since 2012, and anyone who does know it is now over the age. But it's it's an interesting little thing to think about. But he's also done a lot of comedy stuff as well, so like adult comedy stuff. So
yeah, I mean, I'd say from what I understand about the code around celebrities in betting marketing and stuff, I think they'll probably be quite safe with Chris Rock. I think his main thing is he's known as an adult-oriented comedian, is he? But you're right, it's always an interesting thing to consider when we're seeing how many rulings are going against operators in that sort of area.
Yeah, I mean, there was one recently. I think it was it Paddy Power with Peter Crouch, and there was Sky One, Micah Richard. Ted, you'd be able to confirm that if that's right or not.
Yeah, you're right. There was, I think they ruled in favour of the operators in that case, didn't they? If I remember rightly, because they said it was former footballers, both more known for pundits, not a strong appeal to young people.
Yeah, and considering it wasn't that long since they kind of retired. Using Chris Rock's absolutely fine, but I just thought it's an interesting narrative to consider. Kieran, going to come to you on this. Can you just give me an overview of the operators' other sports sponsorship activities in the UK?
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything about this strategy that you think is particularly surprising?
Not necessarily surprising in that sort of sense. I mean, the first one that we'll look at is last year they announced a multi-year deal with Newcastle. Something that a lot of people haven't really picked up on that is that the UK offices are based in Newcastle. So it sort of makes sense where they would sort of start in sponsorship in sport. I mean, you look at Newcastle's progression just recently in the couple of years since they've been taken over by the PIF, and it's pretty crazy, really. It sort of takes you back to when City were taken over, and they've just won the treble. So as a multi-year agreement,
I'm smiling there.
I think as a multi-year agreement, it's a very, very, very clever move to do. I mean, they got into the Champions League this season. Obviously, they didn't go to plan, but they were in the group of death, as people said. But if they continue to progress like they are doing, it's a massive deal for the company.
Does Sunderland Till I Die not appeal to them on Netflix?
Probably not. I mean, I think if Sunderland maybe somehow make a return and they maybe get an investment from another Middle Eastern sort of country, maybe they'll look into that and just take over the whole of the Northeast. But at the minute, I think they're just starting with sponsoring Newcastle. Yeah.
And the darts, they've sponsored the Premier League, so it's now the BetMGM Premier League darts.
Yeah, so they've become the title sponsor of that competition. That's sort of off the back of the recent WDC, which happened around Christmas time, which obviously got a lot of casual fans and dart fans excited, featuring the new sort of UK star Luke Littler, who obviously comes second in that, reaching the final. It was actually the most viewed non-football event in Sky Sports history. So that's another unbelievably strategic sort of sponsorship that they're trying to go for now, trying to get off the back of that. Who knows, maybe this Premier League darts, maybe overtakes that. I'm not sure if it will, because obviously the timing of the Christmas competition, but you never know.
I mean, the inclusion of Luke Littler to the Premier League roster is... Average viewing figures will be up from previous years just because of his inclusion, and to see how he continues and how he performs more on a consistent basis over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very smart move. It's a very smart move. And just on the three that we've spoken about there, darts, football, and horse racing.
Yeah.
To me, they're iconic sports, British sports. They're kind of, at least horse racing and darts are two of the oldest sports in the UK. I think they go back to like Tudor times or even like the 14th century sometimes in different variations. Is this a deliberate tactic from BetMGM to target these iconic sports? Because we always talk about localization within markets. You know, you target the market that you're going to, the audience you're going into. Is that what they're doing on, for want of a better word, an aggressive level, Ted?
It's an interesting one. I mean, if we just look at let's say the example of horse racing, if we just want to focus on that one. Obviously, BetMGM started off as a it's US facing brand. It was a joint venture between Entain and MGM. In the UK, it's just solely run by MGM via the Leo Vegas platform, I believe. If we just compare horse racing in the US and the UK, obviously horse racing does have a following in the US. You've got big meetings like the Kentucky Derby and so on. But I think in the UK, it's got a far more important cultural role. You see jockeys get nominated for Sports Personality of the Year award and things like that over here. So I think it's quite a noticeable sort of change around of sponsorship for BetMGM in the UK to focus on that, clearly quite heavily with Asvot, as opposed to in the US where you often tend to see bookmakers focusing more, in my opinion, on like the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, the NHL, the four big leagues, over maybe some more regional things like NASCAR, things like that. Whilst in the UK, we've mentioned all of those bookmakers before, your Betfreds, your Bet365s, the Flutter brands, the Entain brands, they've all got a lot of visibility in horse racing. They all engage quite heavily with it. So I don't think it's at all surprising that BetMGM is wanting to get in there on what is quite a significant British sport and quite a significant British betting market.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to round off this first half now, and Ted will come to you. Kieran, add on if you so wish. How important is it that these partnerships are activated, and what do you believe BetMGM can do to kind of maximise these sporting partnerships?
I think I'd like to just point out what Kieran mentioned earlier about how, I'd forgotten about this, so I'm glad Kieran raised it. The fact that BetMGM UK, their headquarters is in Newcastle and they've partnered with Newcastle United. I think it's quite important that, you shouldn't just... It's very important for operators not to just slap the name on something and expect to get engagement from that. You've got to build on that and do work on it, work on campaigns, on, as you said, sort of activations, on fan engagement. I think the fact that they're based in Newcastle and the fact that Newcastle is, it's a one club city. It's sort of there's a big community around that club. quite a passionate fan base. I think this presents a really good opportunity for them to have, like a almost maybe like a bit of a regional marketing and fan focused marketing strategy with that club. Obviously, you've got the other sports involved in, like the darts is really sort of fan driven sport, and there's a bit more room for some, I guess you could say, some sort of fun activities in the same way that Paddy Power have done. But importantly, it's got to be unique. They've got BetMGM are going to have to put their own spin on it.
Definitely. I can't agree more on that one. We're gonna go to a quick ad break. Interesting first half, Kieran. Well done. We're gonna be hearing more from Callum after the break, and he's going to talk about Bitcoin.
Brazil, a global economic powerhouse, deeply passionate about sports, and now home to one of the hottest markets in gaming. And we're giving it the full SBC treatment. Join industry leaders, market experts, and all the major players in the country for 3 days of content, exhibition, and epic networking at the first ever SBC Summit Rio.
Welcome back. So, like I said before the ad break, we're now turning our attention away from BetMGM, and we're going to be focusing more on Bitcoin because there's been some interesting, I'd say it's quite interesting developments relating to it. And Callum, can you just provide an overview of what's happened?
Yeah, sure, James. So last week it was a pretty landmark moment for the crypto and the crypto sector in general overall. The US SEC, they finally announced the approval for a Bitcoin ETF last Wednesday after months of rejecting proposals from large asset management firms like Grayscale and BlackRock. But what actually turned the tides for the launch of the ETF was the DC Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favour of Grayscale in its bid to launch its own Bitcoin ETF, the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, last August. So what the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust is, it's a spot ETF, which is an investment service that enables investors to invest in Bitcoin without directly owning it, rather investing in a pool of Bitcoin that is owned by that investment service, such as Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. Now, this will enable Bitcoin just to become more widely available on a larger scale, including to those who are skeptical about the digital currency's volatility, as it now presides under US government law. So it's now going to be available on some of your large exchanges, such as NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. And it will just help stabilize the crypto market. I mean, Bitcoin is, by and large, the largest cryptocurrency. It's not even close at this point. But it does help maybe ease some concerns when you hear about FTX, what happened to that, what happened to Terraform, Genesis, all these bankruptcies that have happened over the last year and a half or so for the crypto industry. So, yeah, it's going to bring in a lot of attention now to Bitcoin specifically. But yeah, it's a lot of stability that it'll bring, but hope to bring. Yeah,
and just for clarity purposes, I asked you to clarify for this to me before we actually went live with the podcast. What's the difference between somebody owning Bitcoin on a platform like Coinbase to somebody owning this Bitcoin pool, so to say? Yeah, so a spot ETF, a spot Bitcoin ETF, you are investing in a pool of Bitcoin. You're almost invested in the asset. So the asset management firm, like a Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, that is a fund set up on a NASDAQ or a New York Stock Exchange, and Grayscale own all the Bitcoin within that pool. You're just investing into that investment product, essentially. Whereas you go onto a Binance or a Coinbase or any other crypto exchange, you are investing into the Bitcoin or the Ethereum, XRP, whatever crypto you're invested in. You're investing directly into that currency. So it's almost you're invested into the futures contracts, which is the underlying asset, which I won't go further into because you might get too confused. You're probably not wrong there, to be honest, mate. But let's try and keep it simple then. Like, why is this a significant moment for Bitcoin? Not just Bitcoin, actually, the cryptocurrency sector and investors at large. It's just opening up the
Bitcoin to a much larger scale than it's ever been on. You are now. It's kind of what the SEC wants in terms. They've begrudgingly done this, by the way. They never wanted a Bitcoin ETF to come out. They've been at war with. Well, I won't say at war, but I'd say they've been rejecting Grayscale and BlackRock's proposals for a Bitcoin ETF for many, many months. So after the court hearing last August, that kind of set the wheels in motion. But yeah, it's just on a much grander and larger scale. So anyone like yourself, James, like you said, you don't know too much about it. You can then just securely go onto a NASDAQ or a New York Stock Exchange and then just seamlessly, if you wanted to invest in a pool in an ETF without, worrying about the volatility of the price, without compliance standards being an issue because it's under US securities law. So they're kind of bringing this into focus with the regulation.
Yeah, I think for me, Bitcoin has always been the stablest of main coins. It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see if there's any inclusion with the others, like Ethereum. I can't think of those off the top of my head, but you also have altcoins as well, which are a hell of a lot more volatile. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they get brought over to this kind of.
Yeah,
I think this new strategy.
I've seen the BlackRock CEO kind of almost call for an Ethereum ETF at the moment. Now I think that's just coming off the back of the Bitcoin one, and the SEC didn't even want that one to come out. So yeah, Bitcoin is by far and away the most stablest. It's the most safest crypto you can even interact with, because in all honesty, I highly doubt it's ever going to collapse at this point now. But it does get unfairly lumped with the other like meme coins like Dogecoin and such like that, because they are just, those meme coins are kind of really there just to like get rich quick schemes pretty much.
Yeah, for me they're the altcoins, and when I dabbled with crypto, it would be gamble on the altcoins, get your money, get the profit where you're happy to come out of it, and then put it back into Bitcoin so it's stable.
Yeah.
And then take it out because I want my money. But what's the reaction been from the financial sectors at large, and kind of have most stakeholders been welcoming, or have there been some concerns that have been raised? You've already said it wasn't fully welcomed.
Yeah, so the SEC did not want this to happen. But in terms of the reaction, there's a lot of like large asset management firms that are launching their own, like Grayscale, like BlackRock. They are two of the largest asset management firms in the world, so they're opening this up to some of the companies that they have shares in, like your Apples and whatnot, and Disney's. So it's just a direct link towards that. In terms of backlash, it was not really backlash, but just risks and warning signs that maybe raise through the Bitcoin ETF launch. I know I spoke to the CEO of Zumo, who are a crypto firm up in Scotland, and their CEO, Nick Jones, he highlighted the carbon emissions that are generated through mining Bitcoin, and it's large. It's really, really, really large. It's the yearly equivalent of mining Bitcoin is the equivalent of some countries put together. Like it's vast. Wow. Yeah, it's really, really vast. It's massive, and that's why there was a lot of commotion happening over the Ethereum merge, which just decreases carbon emissions by like 99% of what they was previously doing. So that might be a cause for maybe an Ethereum ETF. I'm not too sure, but yeah, I'd say in terms of ESG regulations and protocol, I think they will be the first to come at this and say, let's just maybe calm down, maybe in terms of the mining of Bitcoin, but. In terms of the larger financial institutions, I see this as a win for them, to get their foothold and their kickstart into this sector.
Cool. And Ted, just to round the podcast off, is this indicative of increasing mainstream acceptance of Bitcoin? And can you see this having any impact on the development of crypto gambling and the use of blockchain tech by the industry?
Yeah, it's a good question, James. I mean, obviously the SEC governs securities trading in the US, so it doesn't have any sort of regulatory say over gambling. But I do think what this decision could potentially indicate, this quite, as Callum pointed out, quite a sort of begrudging decision by the SEC. What this could indicate is that regulators are obviously becoming far more accepting of the fact that Bitcoin is this huge international market and commodity. that it's not as niche as it used to be, that there's a lot of people interested in investing in it. And, maybe potentially further down the line, we could see gambling regulators, if we just look at, the US, where it's done on a state-by-state basis, perhaps they'll start becoming a bit more open to the possibility of bringing in some new regulations and governance of crypto gambling, which in many areas is a bit of a grey regulatory area. And I mean, certainly from the industry itself, we've seen, there's no shortage of crypto operators out there who do allow people to bet with Bitcoin and other coins. And we've seen operators, including some quite large ones, interested in, as you said, blockchain, maybe not necessarily crypto, but blockchain technology itself and what benefits this can bring the industry in quite a few areas. So, yeah, I'm sure it's something that operators will be paying some attention to.
Perfect. Oh.
Just to piggyback on that, James. Sorry, I think to kind of round up for Bitcoin, not only does it increase its popularity and exposure, but with these new people coming in, it might actually allow them to research Bitcoin and why it was started. I mean, it was started through the back of the 2008 financial crisis, and it was launched in 2008 because of that as a pure peer-to-peer payment method. I think over the years now it's become more of an investment vehicle, but primarily and initially when it was launched, it was made to be a peer-to-peer payment method of transaction without the third party involved. And I think for the crypto and for the crypto casino sector, I think if there can be some regulations that can protect or govern that type of payment method, I think that could be a really, really interesting development for online casinos as well, because they're near instantaneous payment methods and transactions. Yeah,
no, I agree with you. It'd be insanely interesting to see if something like that happens. And one that the listeners should be keeping an eye out on Payment Expert and all our SBC's rosters or websites. That's all we've got time for today. I just want to say thank you to Ted, Callum, and Kieran. Congratulations on your debut. Strong showing, mate. And you'll be back more frequently after this one. So well done.
Yeah,
good performance.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. For anyone interested to reading, understanding more of what we've talked about today, I will leave links to the relevant sites and articles in the description below. But apart from that, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily Podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.